everybody. It's Raina from Blue Cypress Books, and I want to welcome you back to Book Banter. Tonight, I will be talking with Susan Lee, who is a debut author of Soulmates. I met Susan a couple of months ago at Children's Institute, and I am so excited that our relationship has sort of come full circle to this event tonight. This is a YA romance with tons of K-pop and K-drama references, and if you don't know what that is, that's okay. We are going to teach you because I've learned a lot myself over the last few weeks since I finished this book, and I'm super excited to talk to Susan tonight. Also, if you have any questions for Susan or for myself, type them in the comments and we will answer them during the event. And without further ado, I'm going to click this and welcome Susan. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome to Book Banter.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I'm so excited to I do feel like this event is kind of like a hopefully not a full circle, like maybe we could do something in person at some point again, but like this circle of this event because so for everybody, we both went to Children's Institute a couple of months ago in June, and Children's Institute is like it's a book industry convention specifically for children's books and booksellers and publishers and authors to get together and kind of meet and greet and learn all about the products that are coming out, the books that are coming out. And we were on the same floor of the hotel and we just happened to walk into the elevator at the same time. We're going down to the lobby for whatever the next event was. And not a big exchange, but like you stuck in my mind. And then I grabbed a copy of your book and we talked for a few minutes, at the event later that evening. Mm-hmm. And then I read it and fell in love with it. And here we are.
That's awesome. Yeah, I posted this on Instagram, but I'm like, oh, two book lovers in an elevator. Yeah, that's a meet cute. We totally had a meet cute.
Right? Exactly.
We shared a moment. Yeah.
Exactly. So will you give me your book elevator pitch? Because
yeah,
I know what it's about, but let everyone know what it's about.
Sure. And I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm not great at this. And it's so funny, like people, once you write a book, they kind of just throw you into in the middle of all of this. And even at Children's Institute, I've not been everywhere in the US, but I want to believe that I am pretty like, wow, yeah, I know how this country runs. I just could not believe how many booksellers were there and how many bookstores there are in the US. And even then, just like getting to pitch my book to people who may be pitching them to readers and consumers was such just a really pivotal and important moment for me. So I have mastered my pitch from then, but here's Soulmates. And if you can't see, there's also a very large version of Soulmates behind me.
I love that. It's amazing. It looks like a movie poster already, so like they don't have to change anything when it eventually becomes a movie. They just put the actors right there.
And how would I love that? Well, it's so funny. I didn't realize it was going to be that big when I ordered it, and I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, that's very large. So, but it is a childhood friends to enemies to lovers story about two Korean American kids who were best friends growing up. They have a falling out, a mysterious falling out, and don't speak. And a few years later are reunited back in their hometown of San Diego, California, to complete an epic summer bucket list. I like to say that this story is about friendship and forgiveness. It's about family, and it is about first love. It is... I think the interesting nod, and we can talk about this a little bit more as we go on, but it also is a story about, finding and embracing one's identity. But I had never anticipated or tried to write an identity book. I think I just touched on that because truthfully, I was kind of going through my own identity journey during this time. So so you'll get all of that within Soulmates.
Did you, how long ago did you write this?
I wrote this, let's see, I started this book in the summer of 2018. So how many years is that? 4 years.
It's like 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I sold the book in October of 2020. So it's almost 2 years from when I sold it. That it's finally coming out.
So this would finish like, I always wonder like pre and post COVID now or during COVID, because you're saying that you were sort of searching through having an identity crisis of your own, and hello, COVID is like, everybody is like, what am I doing with my life? What have I been doing with my life?
Yeah.
But you had that taken care of by the time COVID
Well,
got
yeah,
here.
actually, what's so interesting is when I first started writing this book, and one of the things that, for those of you who, fingers crossed, will be reading this very soon, I started writing this book because my friends and family and coworkers were all talking about the band BTS. And this was in 2019 when they were really becoming a global phenomenon. And I'm like sitting there, having grown up in the US with a Korean family, and really almost everything that I associate with my Koreanness comes from my family. And so when I would suddenly see this very Korean group of 7 young men, and people screaming for them and getting excited, like, I just didn't get it. I was like, what is happening here? And by the way, at the time, and I don't want Army coming for me because I am a BTS Army now, but at the time I was like, these aren't even the hottest Korean guys I've seen, it's like I've seen guys hotter than this, and so I just didn't get it. And so when I was writing this book early on, it was kind of a little bit more about like the tone of the book was more kind of making fun of this phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 2-year process of writing and editing this book, I went through this journey, and COVID had a big part of this because COVID elevated a lot of Asian racism in the US. And, I was facing racism that I just had never even encountered growing up here. And in all of this, like, and also my exploration of BTS and other bands and K-dramas and stuff, I started just really embracing what everyone else was falling in love with. So this story kind of morphed into kind of an appreciation of this Korean culture producing something that the world can embrace.
Absolutely. So I've been going through a thing with your book. So I'm aware of who BTS is. I've seen pictures. I've probably heard a few songs. Maybe I could pick them out. But when I started reading your book, you're dropping references like left and right, which is great. But I'm like, normally if I didn't know we were doing this, or I hadn't hoped we were doing this, I probably wouldn't have Googled most of it. I got it. It's a band. It's a TV show. Like, I understood that. But then I start Googling. There's a name of a band. I'm like, oh, okay, what is that? There's a name of a TV show. Okay, what is that? Okay. So like now I've got just tabs open. I've got playlists running on my Apple Music because I would pull my phone out and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna listen to this. So I put a couple songs on my coming up playlist so that next time I'm in the car, that's what comes up. And I'm building this as I'm reading. My Netflix queue, my Netflix queue, is growing. My music library is growing, and I absolutely wouldn't call myself a super fan of anything at this point. But all the music that I have listened to is so just fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know every band, obviously, but like it's just so much fun, and it feels like no matter what is going on, you could play pretty much any song and just be like, okay, it's all right. It's gonna be okay.
I mean, truthfully, I still cannot explain the phenomenon globally of K-pop and K-dramas and how in this time and place it exploded. I think there are a few things. One of the things that's kind of very different about Korean music or the Korean music industry versus the West is that in Korea, for you to kind of make it big, either as an actor or a K-pop band, like the fandom really requires accessibility. So like every K-pop group has their own variety show. They do interviews. They are always accessible. They go on these live chats with their fans. And it is culturally like Koreans are like, you owe us a part of yourself if we want to know you so that we can support you. And I think that was a very new thing for the Western fandom, because we're so used to like Justin Bieber or Ariana Grande running from paparazzi, and
Right.
we only get tidbits of gossip about their lives. And it's not like that in Korea. In Korean pop culture, they give you everything. And I think that there's something attractive right now in this day and age, especially when we're separated from humans and all we get is content that's online. What's so fun about what's going on is if you want to get into BTS, if you want to stand BTS or 17 or Crash Landing on You, you could literally go on YouTube and find hours and hours and hours of content to get to know these groups. And there's something fun about that, on top of just their talent. So, one of the things I tried to impress in this book is, this book is not for K drama and K-pop consumers only. It's like
Oh,
there are a
absolutely
lot
not.
of like inside jokes, but a lot of it is also kind of like it makes fun of it too. It makes fun of people who go down the rabbit hole of fandom. But I think that I tried to follow that accessibility. Like I wanted these characters to feel like super accessible to anybody, so that you kind of want more.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that is one of the really attractive things about reading this book is that like I said, I could read it and love it without Googling a single thing, like not looking up anything. And the more you want to dive into it, similar to the music and the TV shows, like you just watch it and you'd be cool.
Yeah.
The further you want to dive into it, the I mean, you can go and dig more out of it.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
but you do show kind of the industry as well as like the pros and cons of the industry too. And
Mhm.
your book isn't out until September 20th. So like being aware of potential spoilers is important, but I feel like you really do this great job of showing why being in that system and it really is like I mean, it's not that we don't have a similar thing. I'm originally from Florida, so like
Mhm.
In Sync and Backstreet
Yeah.
Boys and all these things
Lou
come out of
Pearlman
that
and yeah,
Orlando
yes,
area,
exactly.
right? It was not it was not uncommon
Yeah.
for people that I went to school with to go to that area to be discovered.
Yeah.
Like, because it wasn't not, I mean, that was sort of happening. Like they're
Yeah.
going through these auditioning process and all of that stuff. And there's pros and cons to that type of system.
Yeah.
And you do a great job showing that too, why Jacob might choose something like that, even when it has these potential negatives, because there's positives and
Yeah.
how that affects his life and Hannah's life and everybody around him, get and so I think that's you do a great job humanizing the whole system.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
Thank you. And just to kind of like touch on what you said, this is not a epic high fantasy. It's a basic, like, it's just a sweet rom-com with some deeper issues. So I kind of joke that there are no spoilers in this book because I think we could talk about, I mean, I think it's going to be no secret these two end up together. There's going to be no
you
secret
said it, I
that
didn't.
there's like no secret that they're going to, there was a misunderstanding and they have to figure that out. And he comes in the first couple chapters. When you first introduced to Jacob, you find out he is a big K drama star, and I kind of laugh and say we could talk about anything because I don't think anything's a spoiler coming to this book. But that's the same as like as much as I wanted to put cultural references, accuracy about this industry and all of those things in here. Going back to what I said a little earlier, I also want this to feel super accessible. So this is as like, yes, you can liken it to the days of the heyday of boy bands in the US. You can liken it to the days of the Disney movement and
Mm-hmm.
and Nickelodeon and kids coming out of that, and how these kids are discovered and how they kind of lose their childhood a little bit when they have to work, and a lot of them come from families where they need you to be working. And then I think it's like any kid, teenager who's grown up like at the same place. Like for instance, a big character in this story is the city of San Diego, and the concept of I've lived here my whole life, and that was kind of me. I grew up from the time I was a young kid up through graduating college. So, like so people who kind of had that same hometown for a long time, and I think it's super accessible to that. And it's funny because as San Diego is a character, it also kind of feels like a small town in this book. So it's a love letter to San Diego as well. So.
Oh, that's funny that you said it, because I have no idea how big San Diego is. I have an impression, right? But I don't actually know because I've never been. And yeah, I would picture it in my head much smaller. Like there happens to be a beach, and there happens to be, if you drive way out of town, you can get to this like sculpture garden thing, but like it does feel very, school, coffee shop, there's like, it feels very like, I don't know, almost like you could walk, but you'll take the car. Like that's how
I mean, that's so funny you say that, because I just recently moved back to San Diego. I lived in New York for 11 years. And, but my joke is, like, when I'm in New York or in Korea, when I'm visiting Korea, I will walk anywhere. In San Diego, I will not walk to the Starbucks on the corner. I will get in a car because there's parking available. Why would I walk to the Starbucks? Like if you cross the main road here where there's a stoplight, people stare at you. Like, why is someone walking? And it's just not a walking culture. But like, when I was saying, it's actually a very large town. It's one of the larger cities in the US. But I think in my mind, mentally, I'm just still a kid here because I grew up here, and so I still see things as part of my little neighborhood, or that far off thing that we had to drive to get to, So I think you'll get that feel like this is her small town hometown. Although we all know once you get to San Diego, you're like, oh, this place is huge. That's really big.
Well, that works perfectly, of course, because your character is 17, 18 years old. They're still very much in that mentality as well. They know, if he was on a test, they would know it was a big city. But they are just going to the same 10 places they go to, and it's just the smaller neighborhood. It's funny too when Jacob comes back and he has this like bucket list of things, and he was there from birth to 14, right? So you'd think he had experienced a good number of these, but he either hasn't or doesn't remember. And I was thinking that too, like I might have had maybe a California burrito when you were 7, but like now you're like 18. It's like I don't know what that tastes like. I don't remember at all. So that was fun in this book too.
I think it's really interesting how you see and experience things when you're younger to when you're older. And so like, even when like we're just talking about, it feels like in my head, this is such a small place. And now that I'm older, I'm like, no, I realize it's much larger. So I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on, because even in their relationship, the way that they remember each other is kind of like this, there's a smallness to it. They were very tight, and this is how we interacted together as kids. And now that we're older, they have to come to this realization is, oh, I don't know you as well as I thought I did, because you're different. You're a different person now. You've grown.
Well, and I also wonder, and this is totally, I don't know, this is like interpersonal relationship, maybe not even the book, but if they hadn't been apart for 3 years, people during those ages, like that 14 to 17, 18 age, grow sometimes apart, And so wondering what that would have been like if they hadn't had this separation.
True.
They assume they would be just.
It hurts my heart thinking about it.
I know, right?
Oh, that hurts.
That, but like that might not be true. It's all I posit to say it might be better that they spent the time apart.
I mean, this is the great thing about young adult literature, like, exploring stories about young adult, because we were, and teens are, ever changing very quickly, and so things that we believed to be true when we were young, things that we come to believe to be true when we're moving on to our first jobs and first apartments and all of these things. Like that time, those 5 or 6 years when you're really kind of like feeling things deeply and molding who you're becoming, it's such a fun time to play with, and those are great stories to tell.
I'm a fan of the you don't often see a separation of characters for this length of time, like 30 years, in that age range.
Yeah.
So I think that's a different. Trope's not the right word because nobody does it. That you don't see very often in this age group.
Yeah.
Okay, so Linda has a question.
Okay.
And I'm into it. what is something you learned about the book industry now that you have your first book coming out
Oh
that you didn't
gosh.
know before?
Yeah, so I didn't know anything, to be honest. So my background is I come from corporate America. I worked in human resources for almost 15 years in mostly technology startups. And when I wanted to write or started to think about writing, like I thought, much like anything I do in life, I need to research and learn and study first before trying. And so I would go to like these seminars and try to learn about craft, but it was so over my head because I hadn't even tried to start a story. So when people were talking about craft things or the publishing industry, I just felt like I couldn't grasp this. And so finally someone said, you just got to sit down and start writing first. And then, so I didn't know anything. I think what has been very interesting, especially coming from my background, is there's just not a lot of information that they give authors. Like when it comes to what are success metrics? How many books do I need to sell to be thought of as a success? How do I mean, even the New York Times is, we all know, a curated list that isn't truly about someone who sold the most books. So if those kinds of markers aren't even actually what they appear to be, it is like baffling to me because I come from the land of here's your goals, here's our
Very
expectations,
specific.
here's your performance review, yeah, and here's how you match up against what we wanted you to do, and so this was very hard for me because I never knew if I was doing well. Like I didn't know when I got my book deal, was it a good book deal? I didn't know that when I was editing this book with an editor, that if I could push back or not. It's like, I also didn't know that now that we're about to launch for months, that my job would become trying to market myself when I kind of hate talking about myself online, So these are all just things that we never are kind of told. And I think that it's very frustrating for authors, especially new authors, as they try to navigate this new career, especially if they come from other careers. It's tough. I think, like, I think you need thick skin for this industry, not only because people are speaking about your creative, output, but the industry and the job of an author is not a very clear. And so I've seen people really struggle. I struggle in my own way. Like I'm this kind of struggler. Like if I'm not into it, I go into my group chat or by myself and think this sucks. It's like, this is not okay. But I think for some people, it's really hard to get over and get past. There's a lot of imposter syndrome because we don't know what it means not to be an imposter. Nobody's told us what that looks like. So a lot of guessing. I think these are the things that I'm learning that have been hard and surprising, but we're getting through it. Yeah.
I think that you find some of those similarities in a lot of art forms. Because, if you're a musician, you know how to play guitar, and then somebody tells you you do a good job at it, and then you're like, oh, you're going to put my album out, great. And then I just know how to play guitar and maybe at the coffee shop or whatever, and now I'm supposed to be playing over here and I'm supposed to be saying this and I have to get an Instagram. I've heard that with musician friends, where there's not a lot. Now you have this album. That's fun. And different layers, levels of production or distribution and everything expect different things from you. But I feel similarly, and we're all just sort of like figuring it out. And just for your information, on this end, we don't get a lot of that either. So they're like, you want to have an event with this person, and we're like, yeah, that sounds great, but we're just basing numbers. If you sell 5 books, you sell 50 books, where's the thing? And sometimes they're like, oh, you sold 5 books, that's amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes they're like, oh, you only sold 38 books? Yes, what do you mean? And like, yesterday you literally were like, great job, and today you seem a little lukewarm on that. So it's all just sort of like feeling out, and I honestly feel like almost everything is different. Everyone is different because like you can't judge this off of Harry Potter, but you're both YA authors. How does that work, right? Like they just impossible. So you're almost like basing it off of yourself in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Your particular, how many they printed of your particular
Yes.
book and your particular contract and all of that. And that's upsetting for somebody who doesn't live in spreadsheets, but like I can only imagine coming from somewhere where you're like,
what, not to kind of pull the curtain back for people who are readers and love books, but it is it's not a very organized industry. And I think what's very hard is, I think a lot about like privilege. I think a lot about representation. I think a lot about like my role and the kinds of stories I want to tell. But I am not, like, I'll be the first to tell you that I come from a lot of privilege in ways that a lot of POC and a lot of non-POC don't, meaning I have worked in corporate America for a long time. I have saved up money so that I can, write full time for a while. I have had experiences with things like spreadsheets or expectations or experience enough to be not unafraid to ask questions, where some of us are terrified to ask our agents or editors questions. And so there are kind of privileges that I feel like I've maybe earned as I've lived my life. I'm also a little bit older than a lot of people who are debuting. I'm in my 40s, but I think that I also try to remember that is a unique position to be in, because I've talked to other debuts who are like, I don't know how to ask this question. I don't know. And so we sit in this kind of like frustration or fear. And so this should be the biggest, most momentous thing in our lives, that we're publishing a book. And sometimes we don't know how to be happy about that, And so it is, it's hard. But for me, from my experience, I have found great joy in this process because I've let go of a lot of the frustrations and I've wanted this story to be told. I used to joke and say, I kind of am self-deprecating in many ways. And I used to say, look, this book is not going to change the world. It's not going to change someone's life. And then it's so funny because now that I sit 3 weeks out from a publication, I realize my life has been changed from writing this book. And not only because I'm an author, published author now, but because I got to go through this journey of discovering myself, forgiving myself for not always loving the fact that I had a Korean background, for accepting and embracing having, being Korean, being an American, and so I feel like my life has been changed from reading this book. And I hope that is something, whether this book is just a sweet, fun read for you, whether it is just a wonderful romance you love to read, or whether it gets you into K-pop or K-drama, or whether it helps you in your identity journey personally, I would love any or all of those things for anyone who reads this book.
I think you're going to get it across the board. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that will see themselves in these characters. I know some people that come into the bookstore, some younger audience, some of our younger audience that come into the bookstore, and they would definitely benefit. They'd see themselves in Hannah a little bit. Yeah. I don't know to what degree. I don't know them well enough, but I do know that they'll see themselves in Hannah. So I'm excited to be able to put this book in their hands. And I think they're obviously not the only people out there. And also, like, books touch people in so many different ways.
Yeah, that's very true.
So many different ways. And if you don't change the world, if you just change you have a positive impact on a few people's lives, like, wow. Like, even that, I just like think of something that you send out into the world, you have no contact with that person at all, and you're going to positively impact their lives. And that's just like, that gives me tingles. This is my favorite part of what I'm doing right now, being like part of the events, is being a piece of that puzzle that we get this. We have Facebook user. This isn't a question, but your book looks super cute. Adding to my TBR.
Oh, thanks.
Our goal. We've accomplished our goal.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That is amazing. So what, okay. Did you base Jacob on anyone, either in your life or on the screen?
No, there's question. Like, honestly, I have never in my life been lucky enough to find someone like him. I mean, I just think he is like the sweetest kid, and he is, when I wrote him, I wanted to write. I have a complicated relationship with like my Koreanness, as I've mentioned in the past, and like Korean males to me were just always like my uncle. It's like it's my
Yeah.
uncle or my dad or some like old dude who owns the restaurant down the street. Like I just didn't have like a lot of. I didn't go to school with a lot of Korean kids, and so I had kind of like a notion about what Korean males were like, and I think, and this is something that BTS has done a big thing in kind of the world is kind of destigmatizing um, people of color, Asian men, Korean men specifically, and letting them be seen as handsome and beautiful and can wear makeup and it's okay. I just, I kind of love that, what they're doing, destigmatizing that. And so when I was writing Jacob, I really wanted to write someone who was deep in his own feelings, which I just always used to think Koreans don't like share their feelings ever. Um, and kind of this cinnamon roll who is just really sweet and has a lot to give for people. And I adore him. I just adore him as a character.
I think that's a lot of what we get when you're talking about the K-pop stars being really accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And just doing these Facebook or these Instagram lives or whatever, and these YouTube videos, and really being for however much it is an act or not, but being accessible, saying what they like, what they don't like. I mean, what their favorites of this, and actually showing emotion in different, about different things and talking about stuff that almost, I mean, it makes you feel closer to them, but they feel like real people. That are somehow allowed to be up on stage and do all that stuff.
Do you know who else does this really well? It's a little bit a different level of accessibility. Like Korean stars are accessible like with a large quantity of content. Right. This person does it really well with a depth of content, but it's Taylor Swift. So I'm not a Swiftie, but what I know of Taylor Swift, and so many of my friends love her, and I respect her so much, but like she puts everything out there in her music. So we're all guessing. We know who this song is about. We know this. We knew you were in love because you could not hide it when you were in love with this person. And 5 years later, we know what this song is about. Yes. And that level of accessibility, all of the Swifties, like they feel it deeply. They feel like each of these songs is about them because they know the emotion that Taylor was going through and writing it. And they're like, I've lived that emotion. So like she also does this really well. And she also shares her emotions so well. And that's why she has such a loyal, dedicated fandom, and fan base. So I think she's kind of like, if we wanted to be able to show that this exists outside of K-pop, she's a really great example of that.
I also think that's why some people like don't get it, because if you look at just the song or just a music video or something, you go, okay, it's not bad, it's catchy, but why do people love what's the thing? And I think you're dead on. Like that's like you feel like you know them in a real way and not just through their music. And then I guess there's something to be said back, like if you go back in like classic rock and roll or whatever, and they say, well, they were very removed from the public because treated more, they're not regular people. But I feel like honestly, probably with just the internet in general and being more accessible to everything, now you can't play that card anymore. Like nobody wants a king or queen on a throne, really. I mean, I hate to say Beyonce is an exception, but let's be real. Okay, so maybe, but even her, like she talks to her fan base in a very straight way, like that they love her and she appreciates that, and not in a like I'm reigning above you sort of way. And today we can't, like, I don't think people want to feel like they know each other and not like they're getting an act when
Yeah.
it's off
It's
screen.
a, you know, it's a well-known kind of tool that K-drama and K-pop stars use, is the concept of the parasocial relationship. It's like, yeah, we're going to give you something and you think that it's for you. So there is a loyalty to me, almost as if I feel like I know you. Look, if we step back and look from the outside, we don't know them. They don't know us. They'll never remember us. But like, I just went to 17 concert, and I had a sign, and one of the guys literally looked at me and pointed at my sign and was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I walked away thinking, oh, he knows me. Like, he's going to remember me. No, the next day he has another concert. He's going to see another sign. He'll never remember me. But in my mind, I have this like idea of this parasocial relationship, and now I'm going to be devoted to him for all time, So it's like,
I have a pick from a band that I saw way back, and is their last album the best album I've ever heard? No, but did I listen to it? Yes, I did. Do I have it? Yeah, I do, because in my mind we had a moment which he does not care about, but that existed. Right? It happened for me. So I'm there.
It's the same thing with books, right? We have auto-buy authors. Like, we have those auto-buy authors that I don't even care what the next book is about. I'm going to buy this book because at one point in time, one of your books, many of your books, like, fed my soul or made me laugh when I needed it, or proved a great distraction. And I know I'm going to love everything you write. And I can easily say, hey, maybe this new book isn't the best you've written, but in my mind, I'm gonna, it's like, well, it's my favorite author's book. I'm gonna love it, and it's very similar.
It's a piece of you. It's a piece of what you're doing. It's on your journey, and we'll read that too. That would be good. I also, I know you saw like the video that I ended up at Poppy Tooker's Drag Brunch, which was amazing, selling books there. And one of the queens, she did all of her acts to K-pop, and I was like, I can't believe these things all come together at this moment. And I'm going to send you an email later because I want to see if I can get you to sign a book to her.
Oh yeah, I would love it. I forgot to mention that
at the beginning. Yes. She's like, tell me all about it. So then I'm telling her all about your book, and she's freaking out, and I'm taking these pictures. And it was great. And then
when I lived in New York, I loved the drag scene. I loved going out, and drag brunch was one of my favorite things. So yeah, it would be a dream to have a queen hold my book. Absolutely.
I was just like, I can't believe all these pieces are happening. But that also takes us back to like what your book touching all these people's lives in one way or the other, and like the ripple effect impact it can have. I don't know. Don't also lesson for everyone out there. Don't count out YA, don't count out romance, don't count out any of that, because first of all, sometimes that's just what you need in your life, and second of all, a lot of times they have an impact you were not expecting.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't a big reader growing up, and I got into reading because I moved to San Francisco from San Diego, one of my earlier jobs, and I was in a home by myself. It was the first time I didn't have a roommate or wasn't living at home. And I was lonely. There'd be nights like, even if I went out, you still have to go home, and you're like, it's really quiet here. And I started just picking up books, and I have an obsessive personality. So once I get into something, I'm in. So like, once I started finding books that were interesting to me, and back in the day, I was reading a lot of what we used to call chick lit, which is now women's fiction. Right. And that was like kind of my gateway into romance, and just reading a lot of romance. And it was just a time where I needed kind of companionship, and that's what books gave me. Yep. And they've kind of just always been tried and true for me. There's always a story out there that fills, a need of mine, whether I need to laugh or cry or get away and escape, or have a best friend to reread. It's like the books kind of fill those voids for my life. And so I'm just super proud and almost in awe that I get to write them now.
Yay. So I have one last question. Did you always want to write for YA or like a younger audience, or did that happen this way?
I mean, truthfully, my mom would tell you that I literally still act like I'm 16 years old. I mean, I think it's a couple things, and I'll try to wrap this up really quick. Number one, I read a lot of adult romance, and there was something about being afraid to write it because I was so scared that I was going to ruin it for myself. And I didn't want to get into something that I needed for my own personal purposes, So I think my voice lends itself to YA, the kind of stories and the way that I talk through characters. And the third is, I think that time was a complicated time for me, when I was in high school and never felt pretty and never felt like seen and always felt a little different. I think those are things that, like, my own personal traumas that I need to work through, and getting to write it out in a story is better than therapy, to be honest. So I think that's why I chose YA.
Yeah, it's like the cheapest therapy.
Yeah.
Maybe you buy a few extra journals, but it's fine. And I really like your age group, that 17, 18 age group. It's like they're still very young and teenagers, but also like in this place where they're starting to become more mature enough to like get a look at what's really going on around them.
Yeah.
And thinking maybe not, they don't have a 10-year plan, but you're where are you going to go to college? Like, you need a 2-year plan. What are you doing? And where if you go back to 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds even, you're still just kind of like, woo.
I mean, in this country in 18, you get to vote. And so I think it's a disservice if we try to like negate teenage feelings. It's a disservice if we don't give them credit for what they're feeling and learning and, trying to accomplish in their lives. And I think it's really important that we take 17, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds seriously. I think so many times it just kind of get like pushed aside in a time, a day and age when a lot of them are the only voices that are coming out against gun violence in school. And it's like, I think we have to take them seriously. And so when I write books, I don't ever want it to feel like I'm speaking down to kids at this age. I want them to feel seen and heard. And those are things that I think about and talk about. And so that's important to me.
Yeah. Well, you do an amazing job.
Thank you.
And everybody, I put the link down in the comments, but if you pre-order with the link or give us a call at Blue Cypress, we have signed book plates and we have signed little Post-it note swag.
You got it. You got your stuff. Yeah. Okay, good.
Today. Yeah.
Yay.
So we have that, and if you pick one up in the store or over the phone or through the link on our website, we will put those in the package, and you will get those as well. Thank you.
Oh, it was such a pleasure.
Yes, grab a copy. Yay! It comes out September 20th, definitely. And have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.